Ayan, na-excite ako magsalita. Naka-mute ko pala. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And once again, welcome to another episode of Empowerment Wednesdays. Tonight's topic is all about dealing with bad bosses. But before that, I'd like to greet the ones on the audience. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, shout outs to all your teammates who are currently in Baguio. Tama ba? Baguio. Nasa Baguio pa ba kayo? All right. And of course, I'd also like to thank you for constantly tuning in. Thank you so much for that. All right. So, our topic is all about dealing with bad bosses, and we will definitely start by defining it. But before that, let me also wait for other people to join the conversation, and also I'd like to say shout outs to FO1 Arthur Mendoza and FO1 Neil Virgil Castulo Calindas, former students at NFTI. You're watching from Orchid Garden. And I know it's Baguio, diba? So yeah, shout outs to you guys. Thank you so much for constantly supporting my page. Okay, and I'm also waiting for those who requested for this for this episode, how to deal that with bad bosses. So anyway, um I think one of the things that we have to remember as well is that bad bosses are not really bad in a way that they're evil. It's just that we also have differences when it comes to values, or maybe differences when it comes to perspectives. So tonight we are going to be defining what are the qualities of bad bosses, and also how do we really deal with them. So there's this thing called managing up, meaning that kasi 'di ba, if you're a leader, you're managing your teammates, but there's also another way, which is managing up. You are the subordinate and you're managing, or you're also dealing with your superiors. So anyway, hope you will be able to learn again from this episode, a thing or two maybe, or also if this resonates with you, or maybe you know that there will be people who will be benefiting from this session, please feel free to share this video. And once again, welcome back to another episode of Empowerment Wednesdays. I'm Irene, a real estate broker in the Philippines, a motivational speaker, and a writer. And I do a lot of things in between, but let's stick to that for now. Let me share my screen. All right, there you go. Okay, so again, our topic for tonight is all about dealing with bad bosses. Hello, Miss Cherry. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so we are not discussing this because you can relate to it. We are discussing this because there may be people who can relate to it, and also this will also help us, diba? Help us in such a way that we will not be the kind of person that these qualities, um, ano ba tawag doon, that these qualities show. Hello, Sir Noel. Speaking of good bosses, hello, Sir Noel. My previous boss, ayan, andyan siya sa audience. Thank you so much for constantly tuning in and for constantly supporting my channel. Okay, let me just go back to my slide. Okay, so let's define first what is a bad boss. As always, we start by defining the things that we are supposed to be talking about so that we know the parameters of the discussion. So, and again, join the conversation if you believe that you can share something with regards to your experience in dealing with bad bosses. I'm pretty sure you have like a basic idea, or maybe a very extensive idea of what kind of boss you've had in your professional life. So also this is one way to check on ourselves if we are being good bosses. Hello, sir. No, sir, it's really fun. Thank you. Hi. Yeah, and I hope you're happy. I hope you're all happy today. Okay, so what is a bad boss? She or he is someone who exudes negative qualities, which may result to his or her employees' lack of motivation and other negative feelings. Okay, so there's no specific definition of a bad boss, but from my end, I'm defining it as someone who exudes negative qualities, which result to employees' lack of motivation. Okay, so we will be giving the qualities right after this. Oh, you're not a bad boss. You're actually a pretty cool boss. Super cool boss. Ayun, very, very happy. I'm so happy when people are happy. So, dapat mahawaan tayo ng happiness mo, Sir Noel. All right. So, let's start by defining the qualities of a bad boss. The first quality of a bad boss is that he or she micromanages. And when we say micromanages, you're dealing with all the details of that person's work. Okay, for example, you gave him a task or you gave your subordinates a task, and then you're constantly monitoring that person and you're constantly asking him or her about the progress of that particular task, and you're giving him an exact details of what should be done. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but the constant nudging of your subordinates, that's what makes it different. Because there are also people who would like to, work on their own and then succeed at it. But of course, there's pros and cons to micromanaging. But most of the time, micromanaging is more of a bad thing than a good thing. I always believe this when I hire people under my team, I know that they can do the job that they're given, right? And so I believe that if I give them a task, they will be able to do it even without me constantly appearing behind them or constantly telling them what to do. Because that's the reason why I hired them, right? So that they can do their job. And I'm not hiring people who are not competent. So that's why I really don't micromanage. But I've met so many people who are keen on micromanaging. And as I've mentioned, micromanaging is not so much of a bad thing, but it can be bad depending on how the subordinate actually perceives it. Like I wouldn't want somebody constantly watching what I'm doing or maybe constantly telling me what to do, because I'm of course I'm also professional. I've also had my previous experiences, and so I really like my boss to trust me in whatever it is that I'm doing. Now, happiness. Siyempre, dapat lagi tayong happy. Ayan, daanin sa ngiti. Agree, kaya lagi tayong happy. Pero bakit may boss na masakit magsalita? Ay, mamaya, meron tayo niyan, ma'am. Meron tayo niyan, Miss Cherry. Okay, another quality of a bad boss is having a bad temper. Okay. And having a bad temper, siguro once a month or maybe once a year, it's not always so bad. But having a bad temper all the time, that's a big problem. Because remember that as a boss, you're not supposed to throw tantrums at work. You should be an adult. You are guiding people, right? So you shouldn't be the one throwing bad temper. Having a bad temper is a childish behavior, because as an adult, you should be able to control your outbursts. You should be able to control your emotions, and that's what is expected of a boss. But of course, there are certain instances wherein the boss gets a bad temper. I mean, if I'm saying this now, that there are instances where your boss can have a bad temper, but for as long as it's not a constant thing, like it's not a daily thing, like it's not a regular thing, it's still manageable. But having a constant bad temper, that's really bad. Hello, sir. Hello, Sir Taya. Good evening po. Miss Cherry, menopause ba? Pwede. Pwedeng ganon. Actually, hormonal issues. Diba? Another quality of a bad boss. Oh, I remember so many people. I remember so many people. But, credit grabbing is always a bad trait, because that is a sign of insecurity. That is a sign of not knowing what your job is. Why do you have to grab credits from somebody else's work? If you're really good at your job, you don't even have to wait for credits, right? But anyway, there are there are bosses like that, right? There are credit grabbers. Okay. Pero I mean, it's not only actually from your bosses. Sometimes colleagues as well do this, yung ginagrab yung credit. Or magkasama kayo sa project, they're getting all the credit. So there. So that's a quality of a bad boss. So if you are thinking of grabbing credits from somebody else, please do not do that because it's a very bad trait. Okay, another quality of a bad boss is inconsiderate or lacks empathy. And as you know, I mean, prior to COVID, we don't really you don't really consider a lot of things, but now we are more considerate than ever. Like we can now tolerate babies crying at the background, or maybe kids running at the background, dogs barking at the background during meetings. Well, that's because of work from home. But before COVID happened, we were like very critical about a lot of things, and we are very inconsiderate. We tend to be very inconsiderate with our colleagues and with our subordinates. So yes, inconsiderate is a very bad quality because as a boss, you should know um, people's different perspectives, and you should also understand not only from your point of view but from another person's point of view. And empathy is also something that we should all have. Empathy is putting yourself in another person's shoes. And as a boss, you have to know where your people are coming from. Why are they feeling this way, or why are they doing the things that they're doing, or why do they have this certain behaviors? And the only way to do that is to be really considerate about people in your team. And when you are not being considerate, then it's also a quality of a bad boss. But again, this should be a constant behavior. If one boss is inconsiderate in just one scenario, it's not as if that's already a quality of a bad boss. But if it happens constantly, if it's a daily thing that boss is inconsiderate, then maybe he's a bad boss. Okay. Yes, my last boss, credit grabber, kaya iniwang. Ma'am, pa-copy po ng presentation. The video is available. You can definitely, um, ano ba yun? Replay this one. Ma'am Ice, hindi ba masama sagutin ang boss po? Later on, I will answer those questions. Okay. Another quality of a bad boss is being disrespectful. It's not only about bosses. This is for me, this is my non-negotiable. Every person should know how to respect people. Like if they're disrespectful towards me, I will not disrespect them. I will not do the same thing that they're doing to me. But there are bosses who are disrespectful, for example, calling you in the middle of the night just because they want you to do work, right? It's For me, it's a sign of disrespect, because unless it's a very excuse me, unless it's a very urgent thing, right? But if your boss constantly calls you at night to do the things that you're supposed to do, that you can do, I mean, the next day, that's very disrespectful. Like I've had so many bosses would never ever call me during weekends unless it's an emergency, and I really respect them for that, because every person has their own life to live, right? And we shouldn't be bound by work all the time. We are not slaves of work. Well, unless your job is being a firefighter, wherein your job is really 24/7. But if we're talking about, us people who are civilians, who have who are living normal lives, like we have an 8 to 5 job, and if your boss constantly calls you in the middle of the night, do this and do that, it's very disrespectful. And again, I'm saying this from a perspective that if it's a constant thing, but if your boss calls you in the middle of the night because of an emergency, that's not disrespectful. It's just really call of duty, right? But if it's a constant thing, then you may have to, um, have a review of the quality of a bad boss. Oh, good evening, Ma'am. I saw this topic for us. Thank you. Hello, Sir Cañete. Good evening po. Miss Cherry, respect begets respect. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. We should all start respect from within us so that we will also get the respect from outside of us. That's true. Respect begets respect. Okay. Another quality of a bad boss is being manipulative and demanding. Okay, manipulative, having so much control or demanding so much control over you. Yeah, like um, telling you what to do and what not to do, and also demanding, like even if it's not yet deadline, constantly, constantly pushing you to do this and that. So of course, again, this is very subjective. You may call someone as demanding even though they're not, but again, you have to evaluate based on the if it's a constant thing, if it's a regular thing that's being done to you. Okay, so and again, there are a lot of qualities of a bad boss, but I've only included some of them so that we have at least a point of view of what we are considering as a bad boss. And again, please note that it shouldn't be a one-time thing. For example, one time lang naman ginawa, so it's not as if it's a bad quality, but it's a bad quality if it's constantly happening to you. Like if it happens more than once a week or once a month, more than once a month, that's already something that can be considered as a red flag of having a bad boss. So how do we handle? Ay, meron pa palang last. Okay, qualities, another quality. Ito pala yung last. Tama ba? Ito yung last. He or she does not set a good example. Okay, ano ba yung does not set a good example? Syempre, pag sinabi mong dapat maayos yung desk ng mga tao mo, if you are telling your subordinates to have a very organized desk, then your desk should be the first desk to be organized. If you're constantly telling your subordinates not to be late, then you shouldn't be late. If you are telling your subordinates not to sleep on their job, you should be the first one not to sleep on your job. Okay, so you should be the first example if you're the boss. However, there are so many bosses who do not set a good example, and that's a bad example. That's a good example of a bad example. Okay, so let's if you're a boss right now, please, 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 you should be a role model. Yeah, tama. Role model at all times. Yes, yes, yes. And I'm included in that bad boss. Hindi kaya. Okay. So, how do we really deal with bad bosses? Okay. Tip number one, we have to understand that nobody is perfect. Okay. Sisimulan ko sa ganitong topic, no? Sa ganitong tip. Understand that nobody is perfect. When we are dealing with bad bosses, sometimes we tend to hate them because we have this idea of what a good boss should be. Okay? Kaya mo nasasabi na maganda ang isang bagay kasi alam mo yung pangit na bagay. Kaya mo nasasabing masarap yung ulam kasi alam mo yung lasa ng pangit na lasa ng ulam. So kaya mo sinasabi na bad yung boss mo kasi meron kang idea ng good boss. Does that make sense? So sometimes we consider them as a bad boss because they do not match the standard that we have created in our minds. Okay? So when that happens, definitely we are like, if something does not match your expectations or your standards, you will label them several names. And sometimes we end up telling ourselves that we have a bad boss. But remember that nobody is perfect. Just because your boss doesn't meet your expectations or your standards doesn't mean that he automatically is considered as a bad boss. Okay? Kasi minsan magkaiba lang talaga tayo ng perspective, magkaiba tayo ng expectations. So, kaya sinasabi natin that they're bad, but they're not always bad. Okay? Understand that nobody is perfect. And tip number two, well, you should communicate. And when we say communicate, I've had several episodes in this channel about communication, so you might also want to revisit them. Kagaya nung Tuesday, di ba? Yesterday, I talked about how to articulate your thoughts. You can definitely talk to that person using those tips that I mentioned yesterday. Okay? So you have to communicate. Communication is the foundation of all relationships. Pero that's a very good question. Pero bakit may mga boss na kahit anong gawin mo na maganda, ayaw ka pa din niya? Parang medyo malalim yun, ah. Okay. Tip number two, communicate. Okay? Let's communicate with our boss. And I know it's not easy. Okay, I know because I've tried several times. Okay, but again, nothing beats communication. If it's delivered well, you can definitely manage conflicts using communication. If you cannot talk to that person, you can write a letter. Use the communication skill that you're best at. Like for example, I will take myself as an example. If I cannot talk to my boss because I write better than I speak, I would send an email, or I would write a letter. I would literally write a letter. Okay. Yes, it's not easy. Yes, it's really not easy to communicate with bad bosses, but we have to. If we want to make something work, we must exert all our efforts, right, to make things work. What about that? Okay, hindi ko na get it. Parang alam ko to. Okay. Next turn, Noel, ko talaga. Okay. Tip number three, empathize. When you're talking to people and you really don't understand why they're weird or why they're acting strange, the first thing that you really have to do is to try putting yourself in their shoes. Um, Putting yourself in another person's shoes or empathizing is not a sign of weakness. I remember what my Lola constantly told us when we were younger. And I never really understood what she meant by those words, but I would always hear it from her when I was younger. Lagi niyang sinasabi, kung sino ang may malawak na pangunawa, siya ang umintindi. The person with a better understanding of things should be the first person to understand. It was like, why? Is that a curse? Sumpa ba yun? Parang ako lagi yung dapat umintindi. So because I'm the eldest of three sisters, right? And I would always hear that from my grandmother, and I would always ask her, bakit ganun? Bakit ako yung laging kailangang umunawa? And she would always say, kasi ikaw yung may mas malawak na pangunawa. Because sometimes I would get annoyed by my sisters, when we were kids. And that's what she would always say. And I never really understood that. It just got stuck in my head, and I never really understood that. But when I was growing up, I realized that, hey, she was right. The more you know, the more you should understand. And the only way for you to find out is to really empathize with people, look at things from their perspective, wear their shoes. And that's why when I was growing up, I realized, ang hirap maging judgmental. Kasi, hindi ka pwedeng maging judgmental kapag tinry mong tingnan yung mga bagay-bagay sa pamamagitan ng paglagay yung sarili mo sa sitwasyon ng ibang tao. You can never really judge when you know how to empathize. So empathize. Some people maybe had a very bad childhood, maybe they had negative experiences. Yes, that's true. It's not your fault that they have negative experiences. It's not your fault that they have bad childhood memories. It's not your fault that they are going through rough times. That's true. But the more you understand, the more you seek to understand, the better it is for you. Kasi sometimes, I would always say this, maybe ganyan yung ugali niya kasi hindi siya masaya sa buhay niya. Bakit kaya siya hindi masaya? Maybe that person is going through a rough time, maybe that person is going um, ano ba tawag nito? Through grief. Maybe, 'di ba? Hindi naman lahat ng tao nagsasalita tungkol sa pinagdadaanan nila, 'di ba? So, it's really important to look at each other's perspectives before we judge people, before we try to label them names or maybe call them as bad people or bad bosses. Empathize, okay? Ako masaya na ako, don't worry. Good for you, Sir Noel. I'm so happy. Kwentuhan mo ako later. May kanya-kanyang pinagdadaanan. That's true. Thank you, Miss Cherry. Okay. Next is step number 4 is to clarify their intention. What do they intend to do? Um, Kasi 'di ba, lahat ng mga boss natin may goals yang mga 'yan. Ano ba yung mga goals nila sa buhay? Baka okay, there are bosses who are obsessed with winning. Like I will tell you this, I'm obsessed with winning. Sometimes I would put too much pressure on myself and sometimes hindi ko siya mapigilan na pati yung teammates ko dala-dala yung pressure na yon. And sometimes I would ask them, are you feeling pressured because of the things that I'm saying, because of the things that we're doing? But not all bosses have that, initiative to ask their people. Sometimes ikaw yung magi-initiate ng conversation. Ask mo, ano ba yung, or ask mo, or you don't even have to ask. Sometimes you just have to observe about their intention. May mga bosses na gustong ma-promote, kaya kaya pinupukpukan nila sa quota. Or may mga bosses na sobrang gusto nilang makatulong sa organization, 'di ba? May mga gano'n, kanya-kanya. One of my bad bosses that I consider, talagang sobrang negative yung naging experience ko with him because he would yell at me, he would insult me in front of people. Sobra talagang hindi ko siya makakalimutan. He's my most unforgettable boss. Yeah, sa record na 'to, most unforgettable siya kasi siya talaga yung kino-consider ko talagang bad boss. But when so yun, gano'n yung ginagawa niya sa akin. So, feeling ko kung nandiyan yung mga teammates ko, alam nila kung sino 'tong sinasabi ko. Um, Lagi niya akong iniinsulto, sinisigawan niya ako in front of people, and I have a majority of male teammates, 'no. So, majority ng mga teammates ko puro lalaki, and they would they would sometimes they would, like, empathize with me, and they would feel sorry for me, ganyan. Kasi nga kababae kong tao, sinisigawan ako ng lalaki sa harap ng maraming tao, gano'n. And then constantly insult me. He would make me do random things na talagang yung sobrang pressure. Tapos sa ibang tao hindi niya yun pinapagawa. 'Pag sa akin parang ang dami kong compliance, ang dami kong deadlines. Ta's yung mga deadlines ko, like, he would make me do something, within the day. Like, sobrang absurd yung mga deadlines niya for me. And then, eventually, nung magre-resign na siya, this is why I really can't forget him. Nung magre-resign na siya, sinabihan niya ako, "You are one of my strongest suits." And na-realize ko na the only way to motivate you is to insult you. Because when I insult you, you bring so much sales. So I was like, why did you have to do that? Sabi niya, because you don't respond to flattery. You don't respond to good words. Like, maybe you're used to it or whatever. Pero sabi niya, the more I insulted you, the next day lagi kami production, laging may nade-deliver na expectations, and you always met your expectations. I was like, that was that, that was really heartwarming. When he had his despedida, I didn't even have the ano ba to, the motivation to go there. Kung hindi lang ako pinilit ng mga teammates ko kasi sabi nila lalabas kami, and I was so shocked when I was there. Andun yung buong team namin, pati yung boss ko. And then yun, dun niya sinabi sa akin, in-announce niya sa buong team na, "I did that to you because of this, because of that." I was like, that was so heartwarming. And that's also one of the learnings that I have had in my career, to really clarify the intention. Why are they doing the things that they're doing? Why are they making you do the things that you're doing? Okay, for as long as hindi harassment yon, for as long as hindi ka naman yung binabastos, for as long as it's not something that's beyond your values, or which are against your values, I think you're pretty good to go, right? It's not as if yung intentions ng mga boss natin masama. Karamihan naman ng mga boss natin, especially in the workplace, no, their intentions are always, for most of the time, are for the company. Okay? Never ko nagawa sa'yo yun, takot ko lang sa'yo. Ay naku ma'am, ang bait mo pa, 'pag ako yun hindi puwede yun. Naku ma'am, I will I will tell you later on. Okay, you always meet deadlines or ahead, but that's true. Ay sorry. Thank you, pero thank you. Ayan. Sir, ikaw controller ko. Sir Noel, calm down. That's true. Ako yung taga-ano mo, pampakalma. Kaya nga ice, 'di ba? Chill, chill, laging chill. Okay. Support their goals, especially if it's for the company. Bakit parang nilakto? Tama. Number 5. Ah, you remember. I always say this too. And I always say this to my bosses. If I want to talk to them, no, Sir Noel, can we talk to your office? Or Sir, can I talk to your can we talk? Like can we have some, can we have some time to talk about this or discuss about the things like this and that? Ganyan. Okay, so tip number 5, support their goals, especially if it's for the company. As I've mentioned earlier, ano ba yung intention nila? Okay? Most of the time, yung intention naman nila is about the company. So always support their goals, especially if it's for the company, and also support their causes, and support ka lang. I mean, ito yung lagi ko namang sinasabi, we may have differences. Okay, I've also told some of my bosses about this. We may have differences, but that doesn't mean that, we have the right to, disrespect each other. We really have to support each other's goals, especially if it's for the company. We don't really have to like our bosses. Okay? Yan yung natutunan ko din sa isa kong foreign boss. Sabi niya sa akin, you don't really have to like me, but we have to work together. Right? We have to work together so that we will be able to achieve our goals. If you like me, that's great. If you don't, that's also okay because that doesn't matter for as long as we can work together in a professional way and we can work together harmoniously. Our feelings do not matter. What matters is our jobs. Can we deliver what are expected of us? Okay? So, deliver what is expected of us. Mali yung grammar ko. Tip number 6, be familiar with their preferences and work within those preferences, not against it. Okay, ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng preferences? Kasi 'di ba, may mga bosses na meron silang kanya-kanyang quirks. Like ako as a boss, ang isa sa mga quirks ko sa office, I don't want people talking very loud kasi nadi-distract ako. May mga boss na gano'n, 'di ba? May kanya-kanyang quirks yung mga like I don't want my teammates to be eating on their workspace kasi nangangamoy yung opisina. So may mga kanya-kanyang preferences, kanya-kanyang quirks. So ask your boss whether their preferences or maybe observe kung ano yung preferences niya. Kasi may iba talaga na magkakaiba naman talaga kasi lahat ng tao. So we don't really have the same preferences. So instead of working against it, because that's your boss, what if this time you work within those preferences? Di ba? Para maiba naman. Kasi if you're constantly fighting the tide, you'll be drowning. But if you work with the tide, then you'll go to the shore. 'Di ba? Kapag sinalubong mo yung mga alon, may tendency malunod ka. Pero if you work with the tide, kahit hindi ka mag-swimming, ibabalik at ibabalik ka niya sa shore. So, work within the preferences instead of going against it. Yes, I never forget that. Kaya namimiss kita. Yes, sir. Thank you, thank you. That's very kind. Okay, tip number 7 is be on top of your game. And when I say be on top of your game, you have to do your research. Of course, your bosses always love, always love people who are hardworking and who are smart workers. And when you're on top of your game, kumbaga walang, ano ba sa Tagalog yun? Walang masasabi sa'yo. Kasi lagi kang on top of your game, eh. Diba? And also, that's also for you. If you're always on top of your game, you will never be caught off guard. And that's a very good thing. Kasi ganito yun eh. Naalala ko noon. Kasi nga, toxic yung boss ko, di ba? So, so, bago pa niya hingin sa akin, bago pa niya hingin sa akin, yung mga documents ko or whatever, mga deadlines ko, sinasubmit ko na agad-agad. Para wala na siyang sasabihin, wala na siyang negative feedback. Okay, kung ang deadline mga 1 month from now, 1 week pa lang na-submit ko na yan. So always be on top of your game. It helps you with your own, with your own goals, as well as it gives you a very positive impression from those working around you. Working around you or working with you. Ano ba yung English ko? Working with you. So be on top of your game because nobody can ever criticize someone who's on top of their game. 'Di ba? Ang manglalait lang sa'yo if you're ahead of the game is the people who are insecure. 'Di ba? Yun lang yung pwede manglait sa'yo. Yung mga hindi kayang gawin yung ginagawa mo. When you're on top of your game, even your boss can be impressed with you. 'Di ba? Minsan hindi lang sila nagsasalita, pero natutuwa sila sa'yo. Hello. Hello, Sir Arthur Mendoza, watching here from Pampanga. Hello, good evening po. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, next. Okay, ito yung sagot ko. Yan, tip number 8, do not retaliate. Okay, remember my unforgettable boss, my most unforgettable boss. Okay, there was this one time, first time ko yun talagang mag-retaliate sa boss ko, and I will never do it again. That's the very first time, and that would be the last. When he yelled at me, and I yelled back. And like the entire office heard us because because it was an open space. Like we have a very we have a very modern office space. And I will not deny this. We yelled at each other. He yelled at me, I yelled back. And for me, that was a mistake. Why? Because his behavior is his problem. My behavior is mine. Yelling back at him was a reflection of me as a person. Him yelling at me, that was his problem. But me yelling back, again, that was mine. So it was very unfortunate, but at the same time I learned my lesson the hard way. I should never yell at my boss. Do not retaliate because when you retaliate, it's in a you're putting yourself in a bad light, and that's not what we want, especially when we're at work, when we're at the workplace. We don't want that. Thank you, sir. Well, no, we will never yell at each other because we never really disagreed, right? We never really disagreed with each other. We've always had the same perspective, I think. So that's why. Okay, so do not ever retaliate because it will not bring you anywhere near positive impressions or anywhere near a solution. If you want to talk or if you want to communicate with your boss, do it in a positive way and do it in a polite way. Do not retaliate. Okay. So, nasagot ko ba yung mga questions kanina? Okay, mamaya sagutin ko after ng number 10. Tip number 9. If you really cannot handle it, ask to be transferred to another department if possible. And may nagtanong sa akin ito, ilang beses na, what if I cannot be transferred to another department? Well, it's really up to you. When you're asking for an advice, I would always say this: you're the you're the you're the only person who can answer your question because I'm not in your position. Okay? Because I would have handled things differently. We have our own ways of handling things. And so my advice would be coming from my own perspective about the scenario. Your action will depend on your perception about the scenario. Well, as they call me, I'm so annoyingly positive that I always work around hurdles. I always work around things instead of working against it. So again, if you cannot handle it, then you can ask to be transferred to another department, or maybe you can have a mediator in through your human resources department, or if not, it's really up to you if you want to stay in the company or if you want to move on with your life and have another job or have another profession or do another thing. It's really up to you. But again, make sure that you leave a positive impression with the company. Pinagdadasalan ang mga boss na gano'n. That's also true. That's really, really true. We have to pray for bosses like that, like them. Okay, yung mga mababait na boss. And tip number 10, do not ever badmouth your boss. Okay. So, yung badmouth, for example, I've had so many, hindi naman sobrang dami, like I can just count in one hand na yung mga boss kong merong negative behaviors. But one of the things that I learned is yung ano yun, yung abong hinipan mo sa mukha mo, unang dadapo ba yun? Ito na naman yung Tagalog ko, umiiyak na naman. Anyway, so I don't really badmouth my boss because my boss and the company that I work with is a reflection of my choices in life. Parang ex lang yan. Hindi ko nilalait yung ex ko kasi naging choice ko siya at one point. So I also don't make lait my previous bosses. I also don't make lait my previous companies because again, di ba? So if I make lait or whatever, I will never name drop yung mga kung sino man sila or kung ano man yung company. Kasi, syempre, that's a reflection of me. Okay, I don't want to remind myself of my mistakes. But for the purpose of this conversation, I let out some details about my experiences because I definitely learned a lot from those experiences. And I would like to share it with you because I think it may also help you in one way or another in dealing with bad bosses. Grabe sa pray with candle. Okay. Hi there. Good evening. Okay, so I hope you learned from those tips, but let me just go back to the questions that I had earlier. Ayan, sagutin natin to. Ma'am Ice, hindi ba masama sagutin ang boss? Okay. When we are talking about sagutin, depende po kasi yun eh. Kasi 'di ba 'pag sinasagot mo yung boss mo, it can be in a good way or in a bad way. It's really not so much about uh, ano ba yun? It's really not so much about the content, but how we deliver them. Kasi minsan, kahit negative yung content na sasabihin natin, for as long as maganda naman yung pagkaka-deliver natin, dapat, yun, dapat maayos yung pagkaka-deliver natin. So, for me, it's important to express yourself. But again, going back to the episode yesterday, we really have to articulate our thoughts in a way that we will not be misunderstood, but rather it will be a cause. It will cause better relationships or it will create better relationships. So, hindi masama sagutin ng boss kung tama naman yung pagkakasabi natin. Yan, that's my answer. Okay, bakit may boss na masakit magsalita? Okay, sagutin din natin 'to. Ay, kailangan ko munang okay. Bakit may boss na masakit magsalita? Ang kulit pala ng buhok ko. Bakit may boss na masakit magsalita? Okay, there are two sides of the story. The first one is maybe yung pagkaka-deliver talaga niya hindi maganda. So, the boss may not be so good with delivering the words. Or ikalawa, yun yung time na okay lang naman sana, kaya lang, yun yung time na we are also going through something, kaya tayo nasaktan. And number three, okay, meron po palang ikatlo. And number three, kaya tayo nasaktan kasi there's a truth to it. May katotohanan, may konting katotohanan dun sa sinabi niya. So, dun sa tatlong yon, we just have to figure out kung alin dun sa tatlo. Pangit yung pagkaka-deliver or okay naman yung pagkaka-deliver kaya lang may pinagdadaanan tayo kaya tayo nasaktan. Or ikatlo, baka may konting katotohanan dun sa sinabi. So, pipili lang tayo dun sa bakit may boss na masakit magsalita. Yun, yun yung sagot. Meron pa ba akong ano? Ayan, yung comment. Ako po, sinabi ko ang feelings ko and I will say sorry after. Okay, I will also give my comment on this. Just my 2 cents. Um, I'm not a very apologetic person. And I'm not saying that to put myself in a bad light, but I only apologize if there's a reason to apologize. Kasi ganun yun eh. Um, I always filter the words that I'm saying so that I wouldn't have to apologize. But for example, minsan kasi may times din na maayos naman yung pagkaka-deliver ko, pero nasaktan pa rin yung other person, I will still say sorry. Kasi kung may na-cause akong negative emotion dun sa tao nung sinabi ko yun, I would still say sorry. But in general, I don't really say sorry whenever whenever I believe that there's nothing wrong with what I said. I also say this, we should communicate responsibly so that we don't have to say sorry afterward. So yun, talagang kailangan mag-filter tayo nung kahit kaya we shouldn't be talking when we are emotional. We shouldn't retaliate when when we are at the peak of our emotions. And I'm not saying this because I'm perfect. I'm saying this because I've learned it in a very hard way. I've always, I always learned it the hard way when it comes to communication. Siguro napagdaanan ko yun before para ma-share ko siya later on, and then also people will be able to learn from it. Okay, so marami akong natutunan in the past when it comes to communication. Another thing that I also keep in mind is that I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what other people feel. Ulitin ko. I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what other people feel. But again, I will communicate in a way that I will not be misunderstood. I will do my best, and I will communicate in a way that will not offend people, and it's very carefully thought of before I deliver the words. And number three, kung maganda naman talaga yung pagkaka-deliver ko, and again, nasaktan siya dahil sa sinabi ko, I will say sorry. I will immediately say sorry. Ganun naman ako as a communicator. And again, I'm not perfect. I will never be able to make things perfect, but I'm always doing my best to be mindful about the words that I use, about how I deliver it, so that I will not, hurt people in the process. But if you hurt people, mag-sorry ka. Ganun lang siya kasimple. I, Sabi nga ng mga friends ko, wala daw akong pride. Wala talaga. Kasi para sa akin, pag mali ka, mag-sorry ka. Pag tama ka, di tama ka. You cannot bend, you cannot bend, um, sorry, you cannot make a wrong thing. You cannot make it right, di ba? You cannot twist the truth. Kapag mali ka, mali ka. Pero pagka tama ka naman, hindi tama ka. Kahit hindi ka magsalita, tama ka eh. Di ba? You don't have to say anything if you're on the right side of things. Okay? And yun. Ang dami kong natutunan, Ma'am Aisa. Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. So another thing pala, before I finally close my broadcast, it's been 48 minutes, OMG. Okay. Tip number 10 is never badmouth your boss ever. Um, because remember this, that if you're moving to another job or if you're moving to another department, you don't want your boss to be bad mouthing you as well. So, golden rule tayo. If you don't want to be bad mouthed, let's not also bad mouth our bosses. And another thing, ito rin yung additional tip, don't burn bridges. When you are dealing with your bosses and you had a rift before you left, mahirap yun kasi you're burning a bridge. Don't burn bridges unnecessarily. Ibig sabihin, do not break relationships, especially professional relationships. Dapat maganda yung mga, graceful exit as we call it. Para hindi tayo mahirapan din in the long run because, our industry, especially if you are specializing in an industry, the industry is so small and one day ano ba yun? Magkikita. Magkikita ulit kayo and you don't want this negative experience to ano yan, to influence your current endeavors. All right, so hopefully I was able to deliver that really well. I'm running out of words. Okay. And again, finally, let me share this with you. Remember that nobody's perfect. We may not share the same values, but let's not be overly critical too. Okay, let's not be overly critical too. Sinasabi ko 'yan kasi baka mamaya sinasabi lang natin na bad boss siya. Eh paano kung yan, babalik ang camera. Eh, paano kung bad employee din naman talaga kasi tayo? Paano kung tayo din, baka stubborn tayo, baka inconsiderate tayo, baka demanding tayo? Paano kung yung lahat ng mga sinabi natin tungkol sa boss natin, paano kung reflection lang din pala yon ng mga ayaw natin sa sarili natin? Think about it. Hmm? Oo, baka yung mga nakikita natin sa kanya, yun yung mga iniiwasan natin sa sarili natin. So, it's also good to introspect every now and then. Check with yourself, evaluate yourself. Ano ba yung mga pinagagagawa mo rin sa office or sa work mo? 'Di ba? Baka mamaya ikaw din may pagkukulang. Remember that just like any other relationship, our relationship in the workplace is also a two-way relationship. It's also a give and take relationship. Let's not forget that. Kung gusto nating mag-benefit tayo sa relationship na yun, dapat meron din tayong ibibigay. And this is not only about personal relationships. Lahat ng klase ng relationships, ganon. May kailangan kang ibigay para meron ka ring matanggap. So it's really a give and take process. It's really a give and take um, kind of thing. So again, let's not be overly critical. Maybe we are just, misinterpreting our bosses as well. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And soon enough, malay nyo, meron pala kayong similarities ng boss mo. Yan, baka naman meron. Don't give up on that relationship just like that. Ipaglaban nyo rin yung relationship na yan. Tawang-tawa na naman, tawang-tawa ka na naman dyan, Sir Noel. Ngiting-ngiti ka for sure. 'Di ba? Yeah, 'di ba relationship din naman 'yun? It's just that it's a business relationship. It's not a personal relationship. So, remember, you don't really have to like your boss, but you have to make sure that you are working harmoniously with him or her and with everybody else in the workplace. Your emotions are not a part of your job unless artista ka. Let's not be overly critical. Let's not be overly emotional when we are at work. Okay? So hopefully you were able to learn a thing or two from our episode for tonight. And tomorrow we will be having a guest. Yes. Ito na, ito Sir Noel, baka matawa ka ulit. Ay, our topic for tomorrow is all about moving forward. Sir Noel, pwede ka na mag-react. Okay, so it's about our personal lives naman, introspecting about our own personal lives. Yan. So hopefully you enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to thank you. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. And remember, nobody is perfect. We may not share the same values, but let's not be overly critical too. And and yes, I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Random Thursdays. And kung meron po kayong i-recommend or i-refer ng mga speakers, please feel free to do so. I'm always looking forward to new voices para hindi naman boses ko kasi baka sawang-sawa na kayo sa boses ko at sa pagmumukha ko gabi-gabi. Ayan, mag-invite tayo ng mga guests later on. Okay? So, thank you everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay good. And remember, nobody's perfect like everybody else. So, konting patience and syempre, dagdagan natin ang mga dasal natin para magkaroon tayo ng harmonious relationship always. Thank you everyone. God bless you. Good night.